Hello and welcome back to another Webster Report on this Sunday the 25th of May 2025. Been an epic week for myself. A lot of stuff happening as always in the world. Not a small part of it down to Donald Trump and mainstream media whipping up things about all kinds, from pandemics to politics to everything that's going on. But a little bit got overshadowed on Thursday morning at 11:57 when my grandson entered into this world weighing in at £8.30 an ounce. Ivan the Peacemaker. It's a very, very surreal situation that when you hold your grandson and you've made all your mistakes and you've learned from a load of them, and you think, well, where do I start with you? You know, I've already had my mates commenting on the picture I had of me holding him like that. Have I told you about accepted for value? They're all saying. So, you know, I'm sure we'll get round to having that chat. But you know, I'll let him find his bearings first. Evening, Alex. How's things with you, brother?
Not too bad, mate. I've more or less finished my writing career, so 13 books.
You say that every week.
No, it's true. 13 books on Amazon now, so I'm definitely going to call it lucky for some. Maybe it's the readers it's lucky for, but yeah, new pastures now. Just don't know what they are, but yeah, it's like I think. It's very odd, isn't it? Because we've got people who've talked about creativity on here, and I would normally be resonating strongly with any talk of creativity, but in recent months, I've sort of engaged in, I suppose, a total disintegration of myself and the form of me that I used to be, and it's been a very interesting experience, just sort of sitting with it. And a lot of it for me is like trauma resolution going back like over 5 decades that I never really knew was steering my ship. So letting go of stuff is often the first stage. We can call it healing. I quite like healing. It's better than therapeutic. Therapy's got a bit of a technical feel to it. Sometimes you've got to heal on a soul level, but one of the things I was looking at in my book really was central nervous system recalibration. Just calmness, basically. The ability to get just good quality sleep. Sleep well, eat well, hydrate well, do the basics well. Disconnect the mind. Because one of the things I realised was intellect was used as defence, but in a way that I didn't really understand from being really young. It was sort of wired in. So I didn't understand that I had like central nervous system arousal just by engaging in intellectual discussion, which was draining the hell out of me without me realising. So it's been really interesting sort of switching off to that. And I've seen it as a rite of passage. Like you talk about, I mean, you obviously, in order to have a grandchild, you've got to have a child. I never had children.
I know how it works.
So when you've never had kids, it's like if you create cultural artifacts and products for consumption, they can become like your children. You spend time investing in birthing something that was inside of you. So it's the closest parallel I can find to being a parent, where you're birthing cultural products that people can, relate to. So they're not physical flesh and blood children, but they become mind children. And it's quite interesting to see the relationship you have to these things when you've produced them, because as soon as I produce them, I'm not interested in them anymore. And that's been the case since I wrote my first book. It's like, it's such a labour of love, so much effort to produce it, that when it's gone, you go, just don't want to bother with that anymore. So there's something very cathartic and therapeutic about creative projects when you've birthed them and you can let go of them. And for me, it's like the world's at a point now where it needs to turn a corner. It's very important, if you're going to move forward, that you move forward and travel light. So if you're carrying baggage, if you're carrying stuff that's been with you all your life, I think a big part of your own healing journey, if you want to move into greater wholeness, is to be able to divest yourself of, like a lot of your old patterns, the things that have always been with you. The idea of having a fresh start, like some people they emigrate, they just go to a new country, or they move to the other side of the country. They just want a fresh beginning. They kind of almost want to reinvent themselves. And I think that at this juncture in
that's
history,
a lot of distraction as well, isn't it? Because you go to a new place for a new start, normally new job and new people, it's all distraction. So if the traumas that are actually causing you the issues are within you, you tend to never deal with those traumas until you get to a position where there isn't anything that's been going on. We've spoke about this over the last few weeks, and I think we've both found it hard to articulate because we've expected things and events to happen and go certain ways, and they've not quite happened like that. But the stress and the issues, the pressure that came with those, all of a sudden turned the cameras, well, speaking from myself, my point of view, turned the cameras back on me again. And it was like, well, why am I feeling this now? Why am I still having these issues? I've had messages and I've had contacts recently that have, dug up little bits from the past. And I've spoken to you about little things of it, the message that I sent you to have a look over. Yeah. And it's like, is this to do? Is this like another distraction? Is it pulling me away? Is it something that could be, like you said, cathartic? Again, I've just said to you that I've just rejigged chapter 1 so that there's more flesh into my testimony, into my book. And the way it's panning out, it is cathartic, but it's also trying to find a way of taking it now and being able to look at it and not have all those trauma responses, waiting for that response. When it starts to get more and more relaxed with the anxiety issues and the mental health issues that I've had to deal with over the last 5 years, it's hard to gauge. The other day there was an issue that came up, and all these alarm bells went off, Alex, and they were ringing like mad. And I'm sat there going, "But you know that you're overreacting here." I could hear myself saying it to me. "You're overreacting." I know. It's you're overreacting. Yes. It was like all this has got to be dealt with, and it all with being down at Score Valley in Devon with delivering that Bible study, all the extra bits that now have come to that Bible study, that you basically that could be expanded into a week almost now, just by the bits that you've been going through and the bits I've been going through, and how that matches up with Scripture. And that's how it seems to be now, Alex, that everything that's going on in the world is pointing to the Bible. Everything is pointing to the Bible, be it prophecy, be it third temples, be it Trump being involved with Israel, but against Israel. Taylor will expand on that later, because, we've got these issues where Trump is looking like the savior of America, and he's also classed as like the Messiah of Israel, yet Taylor says he's never been that, and it's always been smoke and mirrors. And that's what we're presented with, a stage play. So it's now time for us to start sifting through all that. And that's why it's good to have the perspective of Taylor coming in to bring those issues that, when we speak about QAnon and stuff like that, there's always people in the chat room who say Q's this, Q's that. It's just information. Let's see how this pans out. But we're certainly moving on. Bill Gates is still, flittering about like his mosquitoes, GMO mosquitoes. He's buzzing about everywhere. Keir Starmer's now giving everything over to the WHO in case we have another pandemic. That normally means to start ringing the bell. There's something to there's something to be looking into here. But this, for me as well, is all part of distraction. It's trying to find out what is the rumour and what is the law. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, again, as you've heard me say many times, there's that much going on in the world now in a hyper-real sense that it's very hard for people who don't have primary access to the sources to really understand what's going on. We're relying on journalistic reporting, so it is a challenge, and it's not as if it's a simple picture. You know, when you talk about Starmer, well, he's connected up now with Macron and Carney to make this like triple. I don't know. Yeah, it reminded me of the three horns in Daniel, and I was asking my bot about this, doing quite a bit of typological work, and trying to get a feel for how these three coming together, because they can't challenge France, Canada, and Britain, can't challenge American imperial power or ruffle the feathers of Trump or Putin, but they can become fairly significant players trying to create a new axis. And it's clearly an axis that is at odds, at least officially, with Trump's position and Vance's position. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And of course, it's almost like Starmer's trying his best to use this time to destroy and dismantle everything of this country, but then preparing the fanfare bugle for Nigel Farage, who's now getting 29-30%. He's a shoo-in. He's definitely going to be the next prime minister. And you think, wow, I mean, considering that at the last election, they got 4 or 5 seats, basically, then lost one, and then they've got one back again. So it's almost unprecedented to move from that level of seats in one term to potentially being the prime minister. I mean, it tells you something about public disgruntlement, but it also tells you something like that could only happen if Starmer made monumental errors that led to him almost effectively falling on his own sword. Now, who would do that? Unless there was something behind it. So, to me, whether you consider it to be political machination or the serpent trickster operating behind the scenes, pulling the marionette strings, it seems like a radical shift that's going to happen from Labour to Reform at some point over the next few, maybe only months, never mind years, because at the rate of knots that Starmer's going, he's alienating absolutely everyone. He's reversed Brexit completely. I mean, if you were looking at somebody trying to implode, he's doing a cracking job. So for me, I'm a bit suspicious of all of this. I'm a bit suspicious of all of it. But again, I don't take it too seriously, because you've got to watch it with one eye and also keep the other eye on your own life. Like the fact that you're a granddad, the fact that I'm getting to the end of a 50-year cycle of living trauma in a particular way that I didn't understand. And so, like, it's far more important for each one of us to be grounded in our own process while keeping one eye on what's going on out there, but only one eye, maybe only half an eye.
Well, it's like at the moment we're watching EastEnders, Emmerdale and Coronation Street all starting to overlap with each other, because, you know, they portray real life, don't they, Alex? These soap opera type things, and people buy into it. We've seen what happened with Deirdre when she got sent to jail. You know, it was get Deirdre out. It was all in the papers. People were making all sounds about this made up stuff. But then we look into the so-called real world, and as you just said, Starmer seems to be like he's doing everything wrong on purpose, but he's getting things done. And it's depleting the situation. I mean, if we look at the distractions that are going on as well, his cars and his houses were targeted by two arsonists who turned out to be Ukrainians and turned out to be rent boys. So has he got a relationship with one of these? Because there's massive rumours that, you know, he's as camp as a row of tents. He loves it, all this kind of stuff. Where does this stop? Where do we stop looking at the actor? Because that's all we're looking at. Taylor tells us about it all the time. We're watching this film that's just playing out. When do we decide that we know the script here? You know, I've just seen mainstream media tell me that Putin ordered all these drone strikes and all these Ukrainian civilians have been killed. And my first question is, really? Is that true? You know, it's not about devastation. It's not about worry for those people. Is it true? And that's where we've got to now, because everything that comes through mainstream media, you've got to take those rose tinted off and you've got to look at them and ask those hard questions. It's when you get the people who are so emotional about everything. Oh, you can't talk about that. We've got to be able to talk about it, Alex. But again, is Starmer doing all this purposefully? He's got to be. He's got to be doing it purposefully, because if we look at what's coming with reform, they've gone, as you said, from a couple of seats to, hey, this is going to be the new Prime Minister. Well, they want to do this and they want to stop these illegal immigrants. And what are they going to do? They're going to bring in digital ID, because then we'll be able to monitor them better. Well, everybody will go, yeah, it's for illegal immigrants, but that's not what it's for. It's for everybody. Once the digital ID is in place, then cash can go. At the talk that I did on Monday with Carlo up at Burnley, we were talking about cash, and we were saying, well, cash is always going to be here. Well, cash is only going to be there until they don't want it. And there was people who said, well, cash generates cash. It creates money. They're not interested in money, Alex, now. They want to get to that collapse, because all the debt's going to have to be forgiven because it can't be paid, but it'll be forgiven and then you'll be offered things. And to get those things, you're going to have to take this digital ID, you're going to have to take whatever it is that's coming. Is that going to be more vaccines? Is that going to be more boosters? They're still pushing it. Dr. John Campbell said about the influenza vax. It was a minus 26, I can't always miss the word, efficacy. It doesn't work. You still get flu, you can still pass it on, and you're still ill. What are you doing then? Why are we doing these things? Because people are being told that that's the right thing to do. People have put a white coat on and a clipboard, and people tend to listen to you. I don't know how you shake people out of that, because the only people that I know that have been shook out of it is because things have happened to them and their loved ones. And it's similar to what I always said about, gas, water, electric, stuff like that. Nobody cares until the knock on the door comes and then they need that help. But then it's a little bit too late. Get the information, get armed with it, and then see where you're sat. Because I don't think everybody can just take everything on, but everybody's got skills. Everybody's got certain expertise in certain areas. And being in touch with the groups that I'm in touch with, you can see these people that are rising. We have the beer guy, Rich. He's showing that he's making headway with just writing on these bills. I showed you earlier, there's a red letter that was attached to my gas bill from many moons ago. That's a joint gyro credit. They always sent it out. It's so simple. Sign and date it, give it them back, done. Why do I need to worry about anything else? Signing it as 45-degree angle in different coloured pens or anything like that. Why do I want to be worrying or stressing about that? What's the basics? Sign, date, give it back. Okay, well, let's go with that. And then you see them telling me I've got remedy, but then you see them not accepting it. But you also see now people writing mortgages off. One of the guys at the meeting wrote his mortgage off with a promissory note. I know that's possible, but he's got it done. He goes round the whatever. I can't remember the group that he's with, but they're doing a tour now to show that this stuff actually works. But people won't go and do it until they have to. And I think the people who can do it need to step forward and go and do it. It's It's the only way that we're going to get hold of the system that works perfectly well. It's the people that are in it that have turned it upside down, so it's always against us. We need to turn it the right way up and put the people back into those positions.
Right. Well, you've asked.
If we're in that fight.
Well, you've asked the question of how would we shape people to recognise stuff. The way I'd frame this is that you've got three things that are closely connected, very closely connected. Data, because we're living in a data age now. Data is king. There's a premium on data. Everyone wants your data because it's valuable, it's lucrative. But you've got data, but information. Information isn't the same as data. Data is just raw. It's something that has to be construed in a particular way in order to be informative. But then as well as data and information being the next step up from data, you've got pattern. Now, pattern is where it gets really interesting. And this is where, again, I have to unashamedly bring it back to Christianity, because in the Christian faith, it isn't just about this Jesus figure, this sacrifice of his blood for redemption. He's the Logos. He's God's reason. He's God's pattern. He's the, if you like, the template through which everything is created. So for me, when we talk about shaking people, we're living in a world of data now that proliferates. It's everywhere, high-speed access. Everybody wants your data. Data's at a premium. Not all data provides useful information. So you've got a competitive advantage if you can shape data into sets which provide information that you can do something with. So we're drowning in data. Even AI, it passes absolutely tons and tons and tons of data at high speed, but not necessarily producing any intelligible information. We've still got to be the crane operator that gets into the crane and makes the data be, should we say, manipulated or construed in such a way that it provides meaningful information. But even information can lead you down a wrong path, because how are you primed to receive information? How do you decode and interpret information if your lens is off? So this is why we need the pattern. And if you look at the pattern in terms of Christianity, Jesus said something. This is how you shape people. He said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, which means we should love Keir Starmer. We should have compassion for Keir Starmer, right? And we should pray for Keir Starmer, right? And if we were in the presence of Keir Starmer, we should manifest the love of Jesus Christ to Keir Starmer. Because if we don't do that, then, like Jesus said, well, if you just love those who love you, what are you doing other than what the Gentiles do? So at some point, we've got to ask, what is that pattern, that Logos pattern that shakes people? Well, they've got to see it. And in a world full of undifferentiated data, what stands out? Everything's just the same as everything else. It's postmodern. This piece of data is the same value as this piece of data, is the same value as this piece of data. Choose your piece of data. Roll up, roll up. Do you want candy floss or a hot dog? How do you choose between them? They've all got some sort of consumerist value. People put value on Doc Martens shoes. Other people put them on old vinyl records in a particular collection. But they're just pieces of data, information, and things that we place a value on. Do they have any inherent value? Quite possibly not. So what does have inherent value? And I think we're living in a world now where we're completely disorientated because we've lost the pattern. We've got all this data that we're drowning in. We've got information, some of which is really interesting information, but some of it can lead us down a garden path. But we've lost the pattern. And the pattern for me is the Logos. And that's the sacrificial love of God. And if we don't see that in the world, what's going to buck the trend? Because everything's just some level of fake.
Yeah. It's sorry, I'm trying to move a few things around. It's like I said, I had a bit of tech issues earlier, but if you just look at this made me laugh because we were talking about Keir anyway, but this is what made me laugh.
Well, it certainly looks like a queer, doesn't it?
Oh, it looks like a queer.
And I've heard him on the wireless, and it sounds like a queer.
Oh, it sounds like a queer and it looks like a queer.
But if it sounds like a queer and looks like a queer, I should think it's probably a queer.
Probably is a queer if he looks like a queer and he sounds like a queer. Probably a queer.
It sounds like a queer and looks like a queer, it's probably a queer,
It
yes.
sounds like a queer, looks like a queer.
Probably a queer.
Probably is a queer.
Probably a queer.
Probably a queer.
Probably a queer, yes.
Probably a queer.
Probably a queer.
Yeah, probably is a queer.
He's married, of course. So this would queer the pitch against him being a queer, even though he looks like a queer.
It does look like a queer, doesn't it?
And he sounds like a queer.
It does sound like a queer.
So even though he looks like a queer and sounds like a queer,
He looks like a queer, he sounds like a queer.
he does. Yes, he does, yes. But he may not actually be a queer, as he's married.
Well, Bunny's married. You're married, aren't you, Bunny?
Oh, yes.
And Bunny's a queer. You're a queer, aren't you, Bunny? Oh, yes. Bunny's a queer.
Yes, yes.
He probably is a
If
queer.
he looks like a queer, sounds like a queer, and Bunny's a queer, yes.
He looks like a queer, he sounds like a queer. Bunny's a queer. I shall put him down as a probable queer. Yes.
Yeah, they went
You know,
through a barren
is it all distraction? Is it all distraction? Because it's absolutely irrelevant whether he loves bumming or not. It's irrelevant, but he's in a position of running this country, so-called, and it's quite clear that he's told what to do. He's not making these decisions, and whatever it is, if it's things that are held over him or whatever it is, from being the head of CPS who dropped all the charges against Savile, you see a pattern here. We've always talked about patterns, Alex, and we see the same pattern forming from all these people.
Yes, well, we do, but it doesn't change the fact that that was quite a cool sketch, actually. That kind of nonsense repetition. Yeah, I'm not finding it too offensive. And they went through a barren patch, them two. I remember when they did Harry and Paul, and it was rubbish. They had I don't know if you remember it, but they had this guy parking Pat away, and everything that they did was just so unfunny. And it's like you could say they were probably desperate for money, and the BBC would buy anything because it was Harry and Paul. It was the worst thing I've ever seen. So I was quite surprised when I saw it was them two, to see that, that was actually quite good. That reminded me more of the Fast Show level sort of quality. So maybe they found the more.
They certainly came to a plateau, didn't they? With Harry Enfield and friends and all that kind of stuff with those characters. The Fast Show when it first came out, it was really fast hit comedy. It was really, really good. I believe they're going together for an anniversary one. So, like I said, when they could actually target real life things, it makes it funny. But now we're always too busy being offended. I mean, we just go back to Bill Gates again here, Alex. Just take a look at all the connections that he's got there, from the World Health Organization at the top, all around the colleges and the universities, the media, CDC, the National Institute of Health with Fauci. He's given money. He said he'd do this in 2009 when he did his TED talk about depopulation. With a good vaccination program and reproductive health care, we can stop the population going up to 9-10 billion. So that is a depopulation program. His background is from Planned Parenthood, which is about abortions. So there's a pattern here. There's a bloodline here as well. And these bloodlines are not just following a pattern of, I want all the money and be wealthy. That they do that, but that's not what it's all about. We know there's a fundamental foundation here, Alex. We've seen it because we know what the only truth is. We know what the foundation was. We know what the rock is. And all these people say that that's wrong. So we've got to be able to you were talking about how do we, it's not just about discernment, information and data. It's how we discern it. Well,
Yeah.
if you're using the rose-tinted glasses that you've been born with and taught through, then you're never going to get to this. You've got to take those glasses off and say, what information have I not looked at? The Bible was a big thing for me to have never looked at. For somebody who classes themselves as somebody who does the due diligence 99% of the time, I haven't done this. I haven't all these opinions on it. And you know full well from the Bible study on when you use a lexicon and you break the Bible down from Lucifer absolutely not being Satan and the impact of everybody pointing at Lucifer and saying he's Satan, the ramifications of that would be if that was in a courtroom. Satan stood in the dock and everybody's pointing at him saying, that's him, it's Lucifer. And I'm not Lucifer. And the judge, God, is going, yeah, he's not Lucifer. You're blaming this Satan, but he's not Lucifer. You're blaming Lucifer. So you need Lucifer there. So when the Bible says Lucifer is the son of somebody, and it's not a son of God, and he's not the son of Satan, then you've got to be able to discern that. You've got to be able to grab hold of what you've been taught and put it to one side and go, well, what does this mean again? And start again. Bill Gates said in 2009, I'm going to put all my billions into this because pandemics is going to be the last bad thing. And as soon as he showed his face in end of 2019, 2020, you can see all of those connections here. How do people not see it, Alex? Is it purposely that they don't see it, or is the delusion that great? My family and friends, if you give them if you borrow a fiver and you give them £4 back, they're going to say you've only given me £4. We can't talk around that extra quid because it's there, it's plain as day. But when we get into go on, sorry.
I think
You cut off, mate. Hang on. Start again. You cut off.
I think if we see it as discerning facts, because you're pointing at facts there, why are people not able to recognize facts? I think there's a question in the chat by Jimmy Hagan here. Who exactly is responsible for abortion? Are we going to sit here and blame a third party for all the abortions instead of the ones actually doing the deed? Now, I don't quite know where that came from, but if we just look at facts like gas, water and electric or commercial jurisdiction and those types of factoids, they're not necessarily intrinsically moral. They've got moral aspects to them in terms of how governance is delivered, but much more visceral in morality, things like abortion, which are prima facie, obviously, abortion is murder. Now, it doesn't matter what anybody tries to say in a sophisticated contemporary world. That doesn't mean there isn't a case if the mother's life's in danger, for example, for looking at it with true clinical judgment. But the bottom line is abortion is murder. It's murder of a fetus. The personhood status argument is nonsense. You're killing a potential life. Anybody who says anything other than that, to me, they're blind. But they're blind by choice. So if you look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, where God says, because people have no interest in believing the truth, but instead want to believe a lie. And why would they want to believe a lie? Because they want to have an abortion. Because what they want to do, and I'm not just saying a woman, even a bloke say, it doesn't matter who it is. Unfortunately, there's been a consequence of a sexual liaison that we now don't want, even though we understand as adults the consequence. And before people start bleating on about rape and stuff like this, of course there are exceptions, but in general terms, abortion has become a multi-billion-dollar industry where aborted fetuses are sold in stem cell research. Now, the bottom line is, no one's saying there isn't a case for it, but if there isn't a moral line where you can't just say it like it is, we have Christians now being arrested for praying silently outside of abortion clinics. That's a person standing up and saying this is murder. And it's not just on individual cases where it can be justified. To have it at such a scale where abortion is normative is an affront to God, who is the creator and who gives life, right?
That's the point. Sorry for just interjecting. Sorry for interjecting here. That's the point to, are we going to just talk about the people who are doing these abortions? Well, when you have a society that normalizes abortion as part of reproductive health care,
exactly,
that then can be made into a multi-billion-dollar corporation that takes all that. So now it's normalized from birth. So like my grandson, that could be normalized for my grandson, just like the firstborn was sacrificed to the storm god Baal so that we'd have nice crops. This is the point to it. It's not the man or the woman deciding that we can't have this baby.
Exactly.
I understand the arguments about rape and things like that.
Yeah.
But we've got to try and form a society that, well, for a start, having no rape would be really beneficial. But when that happens, which it does in this world, is there other alternatives? Can we, without money being, a factor, can people get access to help that would help them through that trauma, to produce this baby, to give it up for adoption, to whatever? Is there a way forward that way rather than, oh yeah, well, there's an exception, we'll get rid of it?
Yeah.
It can't be black and white like that. Go on.
Like you say, once the key is normalization. And my point is, once it's normalized, you're not far from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, where everyone's buying in and just believing something to be valid just because it's become consensual. Now, if we've got a society where lots of things like that are happening, where people believe things that are actually an affront to nature and God at that level are being normalized, then of course they are choosing to believe a lie instead of the truth. So their ability to discern anything, they've sacrificed it because they've said, yeah, I'm not really interested in the moral and ethical dimensions of killing a fetus that's going to become alive. I'm not going to call it that. I'm going to rationalize it away, make out all the reasons why it's justifiable to support this position. In other words, they're rationalizing away the moral horror of what's being done and turning it into some debate that you can talk about in some A-level syllabus on ethics, right? And it's like, pack it in. So if people have done that to such a degree, their discernment compass is going to be off, because if you can't see that that's a moral affront and shouldn't be normalized, there's something wrong with them. But then if you say that in most settings now, you're the problem person, you're the person who's like prehistoric or primitive. But no, and I'm just using that as one example because it's a better example, I think, than just looking at why people don't recognize factual anomalies about the nature of reality, because the nature of reality is basically the philosophical topic of metaphysics, and everyone's got a different cosmology, everyone's got a different understanding of what makes up the universe. So, you've got, say, flat earth theories, you've got solar system theories, you've got different people with different cosmologies about how reality around us is configured, and people will argue about that all day. But moral points, if we can't see them straight, there's something wrong. And I think we've got to shape people more on the level of, of that level of being, morality, ethics, beingness. And that's what, what I'm saying about Jesus, that he turned everything on its head. Love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. If we aren't capable of going to that place, then everything else is just data. It doesn't stand out. It's just another voice in the marketplace of ideas. We've got to be able to impact people by showing God's sacrificial love, and that's not easy to do.
Yeah,
not for
you're
the
right.
natural.
No, it's spot on. That's why, like I always said, Alex, that the point for me was I was shown, because I went through it in this world, that this world is full of evil and it's all upside down. All the court system, all the lies, there had to be a truth. and it was something I've never looked at. To have that humility and go, hey, I don't know everything. I've got opinions on this, but I've never looked at it myself. Why? Because you're busy, because you can't be bothered. I don't know what it is. But over the last 20 years, we've seen things experience. Everything is now on steroids. If we just go back to this, Al, look at this, how long this is ago. Rudolf Steiner was 1891 to 1928. And he's talking about eliminating the soul with medicine. In the future, we'll eliminate the soul with medicine under the pretext of healthy point of view. What is the difference between what Rudolf Steiner's saying there and what Bill Gates was saying with reproductive healthcare and vaccinations? They want to cut everybody off who's already in a delusion. They want to make them these loop-fed automatrons. Now, if this brain chip technology is worth its salt, are you going to be able to then program a meat carcass that has got auto built in? You put a voice in that. This is the wet dream, and they've been going on it for centuries. Nothing's changed, Alex. It's always been about control. They want people to consent to it though now. They've done it in disguise. Everybody's consented in disguise. But when you see the true information, that's when you've got to make the decision. But you can see the information and not discern it, and that's a real crux of the matter here.
Yeah.
How can you not see what is right in front of them?
Because inside of them, they're already twisted. They've got a distorted view of reality. I mean, I think that's one of the points, isn't it? You know, we're called. This is one of the things that I got when we went down to score and I was preparing the course. Satan is starting off as a serpent trickster and then a shapeshifter, and then he's a lawyer in the courtroom regarding Job, and then he takes on the garb of the costume. Really, costume is a great word rather than a garment. A garment is real clothing. He takes on the costume of empire, and then ultimately ends up as a dragon. And we have given a lot of our power over by projecting blame. Orange man bad, Putin bad, and we turn the other into the enemy. And we project all our own stuff. So while humans don't acknowledge the flaws, faults, and corruptions in themselves, they'll project those corruptions onto a convenient figure, whether it's, oh, I'm all right because Trump's a madman, or with sex offenders, you know, the murderers go, oh, I'm all right because I'm not a pedo, I'm not a sex offender, or we can go, oh well, it's. Christians can go, oh, well, it's Satan, really. He's the source of all evil. I've got nothing to do with it, really. Eve got beguiled by crafty Satan, so I don't play any part in it. So we're all seeking to shift the blame rather than take responsibility. And if we can hide behind the crowd who say, oh, yeah, abortion's okay, because that's the feminists said so. And the feminists are fighting for justice against the evil patriarchy. So if you say anything other than that, you're an evil patriarch, and the feminists have every right to come and attack you. And the feminists believe in women's reproductive rights, and therefore the woman has sole authority over the child, and it's her body. So the child suddenly is an extension just of her, of the woman. So we don't even consider the child. And the woman justifies this as part of some patriarchal battle against these powers that have been oppressing her, while she can then conveniently forget that she's deciding to murder the life that's growing inside of her. And that she takes responsibility for that exclusively and says, "Oh no, it's my choice to murder that fetus."
But she's taught, and she justifies it that it's not a baby, it's a fetus, which is like the offspring. It's life, you know, from conception. It's life. We can't get around it. We can try and justify our actions as much as we want, but we can't get around it that is a life that is now blossoming. You don't get life from non-life, so it's got to be life.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not life. So how society is then flattened that off over the period. I mean, I was speaking with my ex-wife when we got married in 1992. It was still expected, you know. We'd still not, you know, we'd still had sex before marriage because, you know, well, we've progressed. That's not what it is anymore. But the marriage was still there. We were still expected to do that. But then from like that generation onwards, they had children young. And so it was like children bringing up children, and all those children have been slowly but surely programmed along the way. And if they go through college and university and they put that flat board on their head, it's almost like they can't learn anything anymore, because if it's not in their books, it can't be true. And I think that was one of the blessings that I had, because I never took to all this authority stuff. I never took to religion because it wasn't given to me. So it's difficult when you speak to people who have been brought up in religions and they say, no, this is the truth. And they read you know, when we're talking about Christians, Catholics, Protestants, whatever, they're reading the same scripture as me. But when I have a question, it's like, oh, we don't worry about that. Why? Well, we'll be raptured out of here, left behind, all that kind of stuff. And you think, but that's not biblical. It's not in the scripture. Where do you get this from? So we go back to that parroting of tradition. I vote for Labour because my dad did. It's the same rubbish. And it's taking that humility to say, I've got to do this for myself. Come as a little child. Come and forget what you've been taught. Come back to me. Speak to me. Wrestle with me. If you've got a question, wrestle with it. You go and ask men and they'll say, no, you're just wrong. Why? Because you are just wrong. That's what we believe. Well, where'd you get it from? Oh, it's 1 Thessalonians, Well, that says after those times. Jesus says immediately after tribulation, you'll see the Son of Man come back. So immediately after tribulation, Jesus says, yep, that's before anything goes wrong. And I'm like, how do you get to that conclusion? Because it's as bad as arguing that everybody pays the bills. I know everybody does, but we shouldn't. Look at the bills of exchange. We shouldn't do this. Look at the Consumer Credit Act. We shouldn't act like this. Oh, don't be stupid. We all do that. That's what we were taught. My mum taught me. We go through all these emotions, Alex. And this delusion is so strong. We think this world is so real. And it's just not. We've been sold a pup at Vanity Fair, mate.
Yeah. Well, one of our, obviously down at Score, I don't think it's some sort of secret, but Donna Lee was arrested. And
considering the lives that she's done, I don't think it's a secret.
Which she pointed out some good stuff about courts, that the banks, you know, charges, orders, everything that they do, you go to a court to conduct business in the jurisdiction of commerce. And by all accounts, she held up really well. And even though she turned up in court, and then they said at the end, when he couldn't get the better of her, well, you wouldn't surrender. It's like, exactly. Wow. I mean, that's like really powerful. So she's a warrior, and she's done a really cracking job. And of course, what they've had to do again is send her away, call her back into court, and they'll issue a warrant for arrest for non-attendance again if she doesn't turn up in early September. And it'll be the same drama again. And they'll try in the meantime to find something to trip her up. But it's been a really interesting, looking at it from the outside, because I've not spoken to Lee since, but the whole way she's conducted herself, they basically kidnapped her with a warrant that had no signature on it. So they basically kidnapped her. She could probably prosecute him for false arrest, charged at £2,000 an hour for false detainment. And you think, well,
if we could take that to a true court with a judge of integrity before a jury, you'd win like that, Alex. Yeah. That's the problem. The only remedies that we have must be pushed through this court system. But in 2008, when it all collapsed, they became limited companies. So they're acting as private profit-making companies. And they just employ people to go through the motions. The warrants for council tax, the warrants for utilities, they're all bundled, unlike the utilities is bundled under the 1954 Gas and Electric Act, forced entry. Okay, but why are you forcing entry? Well, we don't need to know about that. We'll just give you the rubber stamp. Because as long as they pretend it's a shop, they don't need a reason. You're not paying, or there's a revenue issue. They can enforce that. To go in and be recognised, like, you know, plenty of people bring up the birth certificate stuff. That remedy shows you that you're a creditor. So that is linked to something. That opens the birth certificate up, it opens everything up. How can I be recognised by a utility company with that? And yet not, and the court clerk say, yeah, that's a remedy, but it can't be recognised. You have to force it. You have to sue. Can we do that? Can we get through that in this system? Or are they just going to clamp it all down? Because when they're clamping it all down, they're just creating people to fight the system. I'm speaking with a lot of people now. A guy called Wayne Layton, he's making a lot of inroads in the courts with council tax and all kinds of things because he's got nothing left to lose with it. He has to do it because it's not only principle, it's the truth. And somehow we have to keep hold of that truth, Alex. We've got to still stand on that truth, no matter what happens. You know, we've spoke many a time, we're going into the Noahide laws being brought forward, which they look great on the outside. But for me and you, it's not that great because we believe that Jesus was God in the flesh. And the Abrahamic Noahide laws say, well, that's idolatry. That's punishable by decapitation. So me and you have got to put our heads on this guillotine and say, hey, see you on the other side, mate. That has got to be, if that's how it plays out, because there is no other way. When people started to walk away from Jesus because he was saying, look, you've got to do this, this, and that. Well, I like this, and I like my money, and I like that. Oh, I can't do that. And he walked away. And he says to his disciples, so are you going to walk away? And they just went, well, where do we go? You're the only way out of this hole. Where else do we go? There's only you. And it's what we've got to come down to. And we've had this bred into us for 100, 200 years. And the education system, if we look at this, Alex, this is going back to 1918. The chief end of education is to impose on the young the ideal of subordination to the, what's it say there? Sorry. To the common aims of organised humanity. Give us the young and we will create a new mind and a new earth in a single generation. There you have it. That's why we are in this place now. And that's why, because people can get access to the internet and find out what they want in 0.2 of a second, instead of looking for real information to challenge what they've been taught, they get football stats up and things like that, which is what I used to do. I mean, if I'd have had the internet as a teenager, I'd have been lost forever, mate. It would have took me forever. Yeah. But it's the traumas that have happened since that have forced me to just look back and go, wow, look at that, look at that, look at that. And then you point it out to people and they go, you're a nutter. But now those people are being put into those positions and they see what's happening with the world. They see what's happening with society. You know, you've got Angela Rayner saying that all these people are on benefits. They all need to get off them now. They all need to be challenged. There are people that society have created and destroyed, and they're just going to take stuff off them. Why? Why are they going to do that? Why are they giving people who have never been in this country everything that the people in this country should be entitled to? They're creating this rocking situation, and this situation has got to come to a head and it's got to clash. Is it going to be a clash between the people and the establishment, or is they going to keep the focus on the people coming in and let's fight each other? Divide and conquer's always worked. What will stop it working this time, Alex?
Well, I think establishment against establishment is a good distraction. So this whole charade about reform replacing Labour becomes like a sideshow, an attraction. People can get invested in going, oh yeah, if we just get rid of this, if we just, it's like the thing that we said about Trump. You couldn't be any worse than Biden. So it's automatic by default that he must be right just because Biden was wrong. And then people don't look, they just have relief because Biden's gone. Therefore, they don't scrutinise Trump. It's the same thing with Keir Starmer. If Keir Starmer is so bad, in a parallel to Biden, although not having, senility, but he's just really bad, doing everything opposite to what the people want, reversing Brexit. And then people go, oh, brilliant, we've got Nigel in now. And you can see with the percentage swing on the stats from 5 seats and a relatively small percentage to now they're polling at 30%. They're winning by-elections with 78%. So obviously, Starmer's alienation, it would take something of that level to so quickly shift the demographic. So why is he doing it? If it's not to get quick gains, to implement things that they really want, and then Farage won't get rid of a lot of them and he'll introduce new stuff. But the distraction is the elites appearing to be divided or the political establishment when really there's a good chance, as we know, that it's just, as Galloway talks about, two cheeks of the same arse, basically, just taking turns. But we'll get rid of the Tories now. We'll make out this the end of the Tories. And we'll go, oh, it's the end of the Tories. Oh, the most successful. Oh, progress, change. We've got rid of an old archaic institution. What can we replace it with? We don't care. It's got to be better than Starmer and the Tories. All right, then I'll just leave you with that. You said it's got to be. I would just ask, does it really have to be? Or is that just your fantasy? And of course, for most people, they just want change. So as soon as they see change, they go, oh, relief. And that's what we're dealing with. So I think the problem is, it's not that people turn on in some sort of civil war or against the so-called establishment. It's the sideshow within the establishment, I think, that poses the greatest threat to making people complacent. Because, again, if they see a solution that seems to get rid of what was bad, they'll just assume that what replaces it will be good. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Most definitely, mate. Most definitely. And, we often say, well, where does this go? Well, they tell us where it's going.
People are like, wow, this is a bit scary. It's completely new territory.
I mean, will we still need humans?
Not for most things. We'll decide.
So we don't need humans for most things, Alex.
Yeah, exactly.
And they'll decide. They'll decide.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable, isn't it? And people still go, well, what does that mean? Well, it means they don't need us. They don't want us. They don't need us. It's like,
these are the same people who believe that abortion's fine. Oh, well, yeah. Well, where does it end when you start with that? Oh, yeah. Few vaccines, yeah. Depopulation agenda. I don't really believe it. But then people are dying. Oh, there's got to be a different explanation. So people will start rationalizing everything away. They'll start finding excuses for the system. They'll label you as paranoid or a conspiracy theorist to preserve the construct that they need to preserve, so that they don't have to question anything. Because people just they think they're giving themselves an easy life by not questioning, but it's the opposite. They're laying the trap for their future incarceration.
Yeah, they are certainly laying the trap. If we can't start to discern what they are doing and what's going on, it's going to be difficult to try and not just process, but it's going to be difficult to try and move things on from that, to try and establish anything. It's, how do how do you prove that there's some kind of an agenda going on when people refuse to listen to what you're actually trying to say to them? You know, it just doesn't matter. And, you know, we again, Taylor's going to be coming on, so we'll be talking about what Donald Trump's up to and what he's doing. Now,
Yeah.
I'll just play this video because I did ask Taylor to comment on it. I don't know if he said he's watched it, so we'll see. But if we just listen to what's being said here.
The building of the third temple in Jerusalem very soon. And we honor with our President Trump for what he has done for Jerusalem.
Mr. Trump could promise to use his building skills to build a temple.
And one day our true leader will come and we'll be united as a whole Jewish nation. We can rebuild the Beit HaMikdash.
Will Donald Trump be the one to initiate the building of the third temple? Well, these Jews in Israel believe he will. And not only that, they believe he is actually a type of Messiah to them. This is in their own words and in their gematria. We also have the most recent update on the red heifers in Israel and how many of them will be ready for the sacrificial ceremony, which reports from Israel are saying will happen. There's a growing belief among
Bloody adverts and everything. Bill Hicks was right about advertising.
Jews in Israel,
Yeah.
everything that Donald Trump has doing for them, that he is a type of Messiah figure or pre-Messiah figure to them.
Yes. He, I believe, is the Mashiach of Edom. See? And that's why I believe that the Gemati of Donald Trump is Gemati Mashiach of David.
Somebody had to do it. I am the chosen one. Somebody had to do it.
And I have good reason to believe Donald Trump was chosen to be the one to redeem the sins of Asa through offering his assistance in rebuilding the Holy Temple on the Temple Mount and establishing the Jewish kingdom over all of mankind in Jerusalem.
Gemati Mashiach of David. But you know what that means? He, I believe, is the Mashiach of Edom. But Mashiach is nothing more than an anointed one, right? That completely reverses the order of something.
Perhaps it is no accident that the numeric value of Donald Trump in Hebrew is the same as Messiah, son of David, Mashiach ben David, 424.
These aren't isolated opinions. There's quite a lot of talk surrounding Trump on this issue. The next two articles had some very interesting things to say about Donald Trump being a type of pre-messianic figure who sets the stage for the Jewish Messiah. Here's an overview of the key takeaways from those articles. Don't laugh, but what if the great sages, the Chazal, were right in saying that when the Messiah comes, even most Jews won't recognize him? That thought lingers when I consider the strange saga of Donald Trump, a man who didn't descend from heaven with fire and fanfare, but with executive orders and political disruption. He moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, scrapped the Iran deal, defunded UNRWA, shut the PLO office, and elevated unapologetically pro-Israel voices like Nikki Haley and John Bolton. Some call these acts political strategy, others might call them modern miracles, and yet critics paint him as anti-Semitic, even absurdly linking him to the Tree of Life tragedy while ignoring the roaring economy, the quiet aid to Palestinians, and his family's connection to Orthodox Judaism. The media obsesses over his wife's jacket, but scoffs at his overt support for Israel, as if both he and the Jewish state are threats rather than allies. But what if just what Mashiach Tazitin, the time of the Messiah? Scripture says the chosen are often despised, misunderstood, even vilified. Isaiah spoke of restoring judges. Trump has reshaped the courts. Maybe this isn't just politics. Maybe it's prophecy unfolding, one bold decision at a time.
It's an honor to be here with the first Jewish president of the United States.
In the heat of the 2016 U.S. presidential campaign, When Donald Trump trailed far behind in the polls and his victory seemed like a distant fantasy, an extraordinary event unfolded in Jerusalem, right above what many now believe to be the true burial site of King David. It was here at a small venue called Naval David, perched on Mount Zion overlooking the Temple Mount, that Trump's team in Israel held a campaign rally unlike any other. The location was logistically inconvenient, but that was precisely the point. The organizers wanted to connect with the spiritual heart of Jerusalem, as pre-recorded speeches by Trump and Pence played on a large screen, and as speakers like David Friedman invoked Psalm 128, "May Hashem bless you from Zion," a strange and powerful sense of alignment began to take shape. Rabbi Yosef Berger, guardian of King David's tomb, attended the event and sensed something profound was unfolding. Just as King David once overcame fierce opposition to establish his kingdom, Rabbi Berger believed Trump was tapping into that same energy, and he argues Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital completed the spiritual cycle. The rabbi even points to the gematria of Trump's name, 424, the same numerical value as Mashiach ben David, Messiah from the house of David. While this doesn't make Trump the Messiah, Berger insists it hints at a preparatory role in the unfolding of messianic events. The symbolism continued to deepen when it was later discovered that the event site sat directly above a network of caves believed to contain the remains of biblical kings and prophets, including David himself. And then there's the eagle, Ayat, emblazoned on the presidential seal Trump would soon earn. Rabbi Berger sees this not as coincidence, but as fulfillment of ancient prophecy. In Genesis 15, Abraham's covenant was nearly disrupted by birds of prey, save for one, the eagle, representing Israel and the house of David. While it was barred from the covenant back then, Rabbi Shlomo Yeshivik taught that in the end of days, the eagle would return. Now, Rabbi Berger suggests under the sign of that very eagle, Trump has helped reopen Jerusalem to the nations, paving the road for embassies, and perhaps ultimately, I do believe with all of this evidence that President Trump is being used by God to set Israel and the Middle East on the path that it needs to go for biblical prophecies to eventually unfold. Even right now, Trump is making peace, continuing his relationship with Israel. He's doing way more with Israel than any other president, which is why so many Jewish people are viewing him as paving the way for their Messiah and the Messianic age.
Mohammed, you sleep. This is how I and all of these photographers design their albums and wall art. First, I use the design for...
So I'll just cut that off. It goes on for another 5 minutes or so because Jared Kushner has to come into it with what he's been allegedly being involved in with peace over there and things like that. But we can see that these Jewish rabbis have got a belief in this, Alex, and they believe that it's prophecy. So it again, if you're going to look into this seriously and honestly, you have to now start looking to what has been going on biblically, surely.
It's an interesting one. Did you see some comments in the chat where Jimmy Hagan asked a few questions and got a reply?
I couldn't see the chat while I'm playing that, mate.
All right, well, what he said, Webby, I have a question for you. If you trust in God, why not trust?
Say again, mate, you're cut off.
He knows what he's doing and not worry about all
Start
these
again, mate.
Right, I'm back.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, so basically, after Jimmy's comment, you get I am saying because God is within us, we must act. God ain't going to sort it for us. Now, what my answer to that is somewhere in between the two positions. And my position is this: Abraham interceded with God on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah.
So did Moses.
So Abraham had to have enough information about what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah in order to be able to intervene. He needed to understand the state of play on the ground, that God had got to a point of particular imminence of judgment, and Abraham then interceded. If there are 50 righteous men, will you not destroy the city? And he said, if there are 50 righteous men, I will not destroy the city. And he took it down in tens, through 40, 30, 20, and 10, until beneath that, God was still going to destroy it. So then Abraham knew he'd be chancing his arm to go below 10. And the whole point is, because it's a metaphor of the final judgment, when will God finally intervene? Well, it's when righteousness has been rolled back so much that the world is so corrupted. So in that sense, we need to have some discernment around the state of the world, what's going on in the world, without becoming embroiled in it. Like Abraham didn't send a research team down there to look at every little detail of every dodgy interaction between the inhabitants. He had to accept that God said, I'm going to judge it. You've got a part to play. You've got to be perceptive. You've got to intercede with me. You've got to pray in mercy. But ultimately, it's not down to you. So there's clearly a balance. We've got to know enough. We can't, like the parable of the wise and foolish virgins shows that we've got to have some vigilance. We've got to have some recognition. Jesus talked about the signs that we'll be able to see, telling us that the end is near. So there has to be some knowledge, some discernment, some awareness, perhaps some research and some conversation, but not in such a way that we become bogged down with it as a substitute for keeping oil in our own lamp. I think that's the key. So there is a question to be answered, but it's all about getting the balance right. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah. It's before I was born again, I had to learn what this world was about and how this world worked for me to have that questioning open to me. And even at that point, I couldn't see it until I was born again. Then I could discern it a lot clearer. But with that clarity, it becomes because you realize people who you love, you care about, just aren't even in the same playing field because they're still being swept along with everything. So
yeah,
it's not about having no faith in God and what He's doing. It's it's blowing the shofar, it's blowing the trumpet. This is what's going on.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's not true. No, it is. It is what's true. That's
exactly.
the point.
Well, do you know? And Jimmy's come back here with a comment on the bottom. Well, did Abraham save Sodom and Gomorrah? Far as I remember, he didn't. No, he didn't. But if there'd been 20 righteous men in Sodom and Gomorrah, he would have done.
10.
And the point is, we only know after the fact that it didn't work. So we can all talk about what happened after the fact. The fact of the matter was, Abraham did get involved. If there had been 20 righteous men left in Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham's intercession would have saved through his prayer. And that's why Christians are a part of this issue in the world now. Because if Christians are not expressing the light of Christ, then the light is dimmed. Because he ascended to the Father, sent the Spirit into the church as a legacy, as a down payment, so that Christ could be with the church. So if the Christian church doesn't reflect the light of Christ, the point comes when the amount of light, the amount of witness in the world is so diminished that judgment becomes inevitable. So we still have a part to play as believers in being the light and engaging the darkness. We've got to fight by not using swords, but by using discernment and expressing the life and light of Jesus Christ in the world.
Well, he says about, Jimmy was saying about Sodom, that the lesson learned that it didn't work. Well, we go back to Nineveh, when Jonah was told to go and tell them, listen, you've got to stop doing this because you're going to get judged on it. And they were preached to. Sodom and Gomorrah, there was nobody to listen. There was nobody preaching there. There was only Lot that listened and he was saved. But Nineveh repented and Nineveh didn't get judged. So to say there it's no point to it is it's moot, because there's examples of it in Scripture. Nineveh repented and was saved. Then Nineveh fell again, then got wiped out. So the point is, I mean, I can't remember what the scripture is, Alex, but there's a scripture where a man saved the city, but he's not marked down anywhere. Nobody knows his name. Yet this man saved the city and he wasn't marked. So the point is, you've got to exchange that information. People will do what they want with it, but you've got to sow those seeds. There's no point throwing pearls in front of swine. People who just go, no, I'm adamant, I know that, I know this, I know that. Okay, you crack on. Those are the people that you can't reach. Those are the people that were in Sodom and Gomorrah. But to say that there's no point to it, well, let's just be subjective. Let's just go and sit in a mountain. Say, God's in my heart. God knows my heart. God loves me. That's not what we're here for. Because the heart is the most deceptive, the most evil that it can be. You can say, I love people, but your heart tells you by how you act. And to say that God is in my heart, it's true and not true at the same time.
Yeah, it's not good enough, that. And I think the thing is, it's a standard line that God's in your heart. It's not enough, as we've said many times before, but you need discernment. And the point is, there's a I can't remember exactly where it is in Genesis. It might be Genesis 35. But basically, there's been a big focus on Bethel. And Bethel means the house of God, right? Now, when Jacob's wife obviously had Rachel and Leah, but he'd already had 11 sons, the 11 tribes of the 12. And basically, Rachel died in childbirth. And it was Benjamin, but she named him Ben-Oni, which was basically all to do with loss. And basically, Jacob had now been renamed Israel, renamed him Benjamin. It's like son of the right hand. So it's something changed in that naming. But Rachel died giving birth between Bethel and Bethlehem. Now, Bethel means the house of God. But between the house of God and Bethlehem, house of bread, where Jesus came from, it's very significant that Rachel died in between the two, in this halfway liminal space between the two, because just having an idea of God as Bethel, the house of God, isn't enough, because God as a concept needs to be incarnated. So Rachel demonstrates, in terms of covenant promise, the 12th tribe of Israel came, she said Ben-Oni, renamed Benjamin, but died in between Bethel and Bethlehem. We do not get to salvation till we get to Bethlehem, till we get to the actual incarnation of God, not the concept of God as the house of God, a philosophy, an idea about God, but God incarnated in Bethlehem. And I think that that's the heart of the matter. God has to enter into this world. And how does he enter into this world before he finally comes back? Through the church that's here. So if the church is operating properly, it's got to have its eyes open. It's got to intervene. You cannot have a view of God judging and one day coming back where the church are just a bunch of spectators watching. You know, hey, come down to the cinema screen and we're going to show you a nice little movie about what's going to unfold. We are a part of it. What we do, like Abraham and his intercession, is a huge part of what happens. We might not think it is, but God has given that charge to the church. What an incredible privilege that God would entrust his light to mere mortals, but he has done. So we've got to play our part. That includes research.
I agree. God's daughter in the chat room says, Paul, is that why in Ezekiel God said he will remove your heart of stone to give you a new heart of flesh?
Right, yes, that's the book.
That's at the cross. Everybody had a heart of stone. Everybody had to be told to obey. Do this, do this, do this, do this. Then after the cross, the law was written in here. So now we have the knowledge of good and evil. We know what's good, we know what's bad, but we have justification of ourselves, and we say, Well, that's okay to do. Why? Because everybody says it's okay to do. So your heart of flesh has understanding, but you also have a justification, and you can also seal that heart up. My heart was destroyed wide open again, because I knew that everything that I'd been taught to be true was now lies or littered with it. And I had to start again. And that was the point where God met me, where Jesus met me, and I was born again. And I came back into it, this world, not in it, to be in it, but not of it. And when I could see what was going on in this world, I was able to discern it, and I was able to articulate it. That's the difference between the Old Testament, which was the promise of what's to come, and how hard it was, how people found it so hard to understand what Jesus was talking about. Be born again. Oh, how do I get back into my mum's womb? You know, that's ludicrous to think. Because everybody, even the people who aren't Christians, say, well, of course that's a spiritual birth. But it's to come as that child. Forget what you've been taught. Forget Lucifer being Satan. What does my word say? Come and talk to me. Does it say that? Well, no, it doesn't. Well, there you go. What does it say? That's how we start to learn. So, yeah, God's daughter, that's a really good question. That's how we get past this. Taylor.
Yeah, what's up?
You awake?
Yeah, I'm awake.
Yeah, I see you yawning in the chat room, mate.
Well, that's for a different reason.
Okay. What can you add to this? I mean, you saw those little bits about Trump. You see that these rabbis, these Israeli Jewish rabbis, are so taken in because, you know, you're adamant that Trump is playing them, and Hugh tells us all this. How do the rabbis not know it?
Well, because they're not in on it. And by the way, not every rabbi is ignorant of the fact that Trump played them. And also, I should also add this as well, that another reason why Trump doesn't come out, you know, aside from the obvious reasons why he won't come out and just say the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, like a lot of people foolishly want him to. But you know, another thing is, you know, it's a good lesson to learn that we don't want to blame everyone that just so happens to have Jewish descendants or Khazarian descendants. You know, we don't want to be one of those kind of grifters, because that's just not fair. It's because, you know, it's the equivalent of saying, hey, look, you're a Mexican, that must mean that you're a you're a druggie, that you're a drug cartel dude, or if you're Italian, that means you're in the mafia. You know, that kind of thing. It's always aimed at a specific group of individuals who are the main targets, and meanwhile the normie Jews, they're the ones who are also victims of this. And in some ways, you could even say that they're so that they're even worse off than we are in certain ways. But yeah, it's all been a fun little well, not fun, but it's all been a game, you know. As there's that good ass Godfather 2 moment where Michael Corleone's talking about Hyman Roth. You know what I'm talking about? The one where he's in the chair.
Mm.
Yeah, where he says, you know, keep your enemies close, and you're actually, you know what? Let me pull up the clip. Actually, I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and show it so that way that people can see it for themselves. Give me a second. I gotta look. There we go. This should be good. Okay.
Very good.
Hold on. Let me do the presentation. Okay, that should work. You see it?
No. Yeah, I do now.
Okay, good.
No sound.
Fuck. Hate that so much. Let me fix that. Wait. No, the audio was on. It was just really quiet. You guys got to give it a second. Okay.
Big desk. I remember when I was a kid, Frankie, we had to be very quiet when we played near here.
He's still being very quiet.
I don't know how to turn it up any higher.
I was very happy.
Turn your YouTube volume up.
It is up all the way.
Turn your PC volume up.
Now you.
You need the subtitles on.
My father taught me many things.
Yeah, you know what?
He probably put Italian subtitles on it, mate.
Something like that. Here, this will be better.
You heard what happened in my home?
I almost died myself. It was all so relieving.
In my home! In my bedroom where my wife sleeps! Where my children come and play with their toys. In my home.
So here's a background of this scene. Hyman Roth, who's a big Jewish gangster, it was a mafia boss. Had his father killed and almost had him killed. That's the background of this.
I want you to help me take my revenge.
Michael, anything. What can I do?
Settle these troubles with the Rosado brothers.
Mike, I don't understand. I don't have your brain for big deals. But this is a street thing. That Hyman Roth in Miami, he's backing up those son of a bitches.
I know he is.
Then why? Why do you ask me to lay down to him, Mike?
It was Hyman Roth that tried to have me killed. I know it was him.
Jesus Christ, Mike. Jesus Christ. Look, let's get them all. Let's hit them all now while we got the muscle.
Okay, well, what's the context of this?
My father's old study.
Say again?
What's the context to it? Why are you showing us?
Okay, well, let's just wait. Let's let this play out a little bit more, and then I'll explain.
It's changed.
Very slow, mate.
I remember there used to be a big desk was here. I remember when I was a kid, Frankie, we had to be very quiet when we played near here. I was very happy that this house never went to strangers. First Clemenza took it over, now you. My father taught me many things here. He taught me in this room. He taught me, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Now, if Hyman Roth sees that I interceded in this thing, in the Rosado brothers' favor, he's going to think his relationship with me is still good. Agabit.
Webby.
That's what I want him to think. I want him completely relaxed and confident in our friendship. Then I'll be able to find out who the traitor in my family was.
Okay, so the context of this scene is that okay, so the context, as I said, Hyman Roth, the big Jewish gangster, he's one of the 5 mafia families of New York, had his family killed. I mean, had his father killed. And the context, the reason why I showed that scene is as a allegory for what Trump is his relationship with Israel, and especially with Bibi Netanyahu. So I want you to replace that scene, Al Pacino's character, replace that with Trump, and then replace that, and then the guy he's talking to, you can replace him with, I don't know, any of these overzealous sunshine patriot kinds, you know, the ones that say, "Oh, we know it's Israel, we know it's the Jews. Let's just go hammer them out right now. Let's go take them out publicly." And he's saying, "No, I'm gonna keep them. Keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer," which essentially is an allegory for saying that while Trump is doing all that, Trump is keeping the Zionists close. That's why you always see him with that's why you always saw him with the rabbis. He was in front of the Wailing Wall. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which was already pretty much a set in stone thing anyway. Recognized the Golan Heights as Israeli, which, let's be honest, that was already a thing unofficially for the last several decades. So that didn't really accomplish much of anything. And so what he's done is by making himself look like a quote unquote Messiah for the Jewish people, he's turned them, the Jewish people, over to his side and against Bibi Netanyahu, and that's and that of course plays in to the to the whole problem with the Christian evangelicals, the ones that love the Schofield Reference Bible, the ones that think that you have to worship Israel. The state of Israel is everything, even more so than their own country. And so what it comes down to is that Trump played the Zionists by pretending to be one of them, while at the same time he was undermining them, such as, first by dealing with their agencies here in the U.S., like the ADL, the AIPAC, etc. Which, by the way, the ADL, I'm just going to say this as a little extra. The ADL was founded in defense of a Jewish serial rapist who raped and murdered a little girl, and then tried to pass the blame onto a black guy, and he was lynched. And that's how the ADL was formed, in order to protect him. So that should tell you, that alone should tell you exactly what agencies like this are meant for. But anyway, so that's always been Trump's game. You play the Israeli you play the Israeli card. Well, even today, the Jews love him, and they hate Netanyahu, especially after this whole Gaza fiasco, this whole Gaza wag the dog event. And so what he's done overall is he has killed the Jewish power. There's a nice quote he said several years ago. How I forget when exactly it was. It was during his first term, I believe. He said, "Geez, 10 years ago, Congress was completely controlled by Israel, and nowadays it's the exact opposite." And then, of course, he prefaces that by saying, which is a shame, of course. And the point of what they're making is that he has killed the Zionist power structure that has controlled both the U.S. and really the Western world at large for the last several decades. And keep in mind, as well, as that there's two different wings to the cabal. There's the globalist section, and then there's the Zionists, the Likud types. And that's the ones that, and the Likud types, they're the ones that Trump has been doing this Israel thing to fight against. Nowadays, he doesn't even have to play the game anymore, though. As I talked about a couple weeks ago, now the fake Israel rhetoric has become public, and Trump doesn't have to play that same card anymore, which is good. Obviously, you still can't come out and say, Israel bad, blah 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 blah. Because you still have millions and millions of evangelical Christians who are still brainwashed, unfortunately, and you can't alienate them either, because they're most of a huge chunk of the Republican base is the evangelical Christians.
Christian they're brainwashed into what? Sorry,
Schofield Reference Bible. They're the ones that worship Israel.
We've got to redefine this term Christian, Alex.
Well,
Simply-
well, the term Christian is just like many other terms, like, follow the science or listen to the experts. On paper, when you
Well,
hear these
that's
things,
the point. That's the point, Taylor. Being a Christian, you're meant to follow what Jesus says and what the Word of God says. So if that's being a Christian, you can't say you're a Catholic and a Christian at the same time. You can't be those evangelicals that you're talking about, because Jesus goes against all of this. And if Trump is now in a position where they believe in, these rabbis believe in, you say not all of them do, the ones that the rabbinic Jews that use the Talmud, that are waiting for the earthly Messiah, the ones that rejected Jesus, they are the ones that are saying Trump is this. But is Trump only doing this with Israel, or is he doing it with other leaders? Because there's an interesting article. There's an interesting article here where, if it works. I'm sick of adverts.
yeah, those adverts are so annoying.
Sick of I hate advertising. I hate adverts. Wow. Get everything all set up and it plays adverts. But it's even the wrong story now.
Thousands of stories talking about it. And we have documentaries.
What browser are you using?
News stories. Is Natalie here? Somebody here to turn that?
Oh, it's lagging really bad.
Each one of those white things you see is a cross, and there's approximately 1,000 of them. They're all white farmers, the family of white farmers, and those cars aren't driving. They're stopped there to pay respects to their family member who's killed, and it's a terrible sight. I've never seen anything like it. Both
Can't
sides
see the
of the
video.
road you've crossed. Those people were all killed.
Have they told you where that is, Mr. President? No, I'd like to know where that is, because this I've never seen.
These are articles over the last few days. Death of people. Death. Horrible death.
Yes, this scene.
Death. When white South Africans are fleeing because of the violence, the racist laws, and this is all. And I'll give these to you. So when you say what would I like to do, I don't know what to do. Look at this. White South African couple say that they were attacked violently.
That lag was very bad.
Working at Metro means I need to. It's fast-paced.
You are?
And brings in
That lag was very bad.
Right, I need to get on that.
What you saying?
Said that lag was horrible. I could barely see or hear it.
Why was it very bad?
It was, I mean, the lag was just so bad, and the video wasn't playing. I could somewhat hear it, but it was very muffled, if that makes sense. But I know what clip that is. That's the one where he's talking to the South African president.
It actually played out. It actually played all right on this end. So I don't know. You said you're having trouble before, but we've talked about this white farmers thing a lot. That's the South African president saying he doesn't know about it. So is that
about
true?
there's actually an article that actually was going to go over about that. I was going to get to that.
But on this point about Trump and the evangelical right, from a sort of the Christian perspective, obviously there's an end time thought about Antichrist, Messiah, false Messiah. But I don't think that's the point here really with Trump, because Antichrist doesn't mean necessarily against Christ. It can be a substitute Christ. And I think if you think about the Roman emperors, what used to happen was they used to use worship of the emperor as a political control tool. Virtually none of the emperors believed that they actually were God, apart from Gaius Caligula, who was considered insane, and he really did believe he was God. So the issue really with Trump is not necessarily that he's an opponent of or a mobilizer of a religious base. It's more the fact that by being who he is and using the methods that he is, he could be inadvertently leading people to follow him as some kind of figure who's going to put the world right, as opposed to God being the figure who will put the world right. Now, obviously, gods, even if they weren't Christian gods, used to have priests, mediators, physical representatives on earth. That's what the Roman Catholic does to the church does to the Pope, makes him the vicar of Christ, makes him the visible representative of Christ on earth. So this has always happened, that you get these priestly carriers of divine truth. And it's not even what Trump does or doesn't do. It's how people attach to Donald Trump's role as the issue. If people see him as a salvific, redemptive figure, they could really be inviting a lot of problems, because whatever his agenda is, good or bad or indifferent, it's not the same as how people receive his influence. And if they follow Trump and Trump's line, then they may not be following a different line that might be a better way of dealing with the problems in the world. So on a political level, Trump looks like he's better than the leftists, obviously. But that doesn't mean objectively he is the right person to follow. Just because somebody is very forthright, very businesslike, very active, it doesn't mean that that's the right course of action. It just might seem that way optically. So I think we've got to be aware of the people who follow him, including right-wing evangelical Christians who, set him up maybe on a pedestal in some cases. We've got to always have discernment. We've really got to look at beyond the shadows, beyond the appearances, and we've got to make decisions based on what we know in our own heart is the right thing to do, not farming out the solutions to all our problems to political figures. Now, that might seem like a bit of an aside, but it's a dangerous trap for people to fall into. And the more charismatic and effective a leader is, the more potential there is for people to be misled.
Yeah. Have you got? Do you say you've got some other stuff to share, Taylor?
Well, yes.
Do you want to bring it up?
Okay. So first, just on the last point on the Israel thing. Q drop 9/16 from March 10th, 2018. We are saving Israel for last. Very specific reason, not mentioned a single time. And then there's another one that's when do you attack the king? After you it's like, how do you deal with a wild animal? Hold on. Let me see if that pops up. It should. Oh, no, dangerous animal. That's what it is. It can be a little difficult in order to find these things. There it is. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing just because it's not necessary. How do you capture a very dangerous animal? Do you attack it from the front? Do you walk through the front door? Do you signal ahead of time you will be attacking? How do you distinguish between good and bad? What do you trust to keep secrets? How do you prevent leaks? And yada, yada, yada. It keeps going. And, when Q asks a question, he always wants you to look it up and think critically. And the answer to this one is obviously No, you don't attack you don't attack a dangerous animal from the front. You gain its trust, and then you whack it on the top of the head. Like say if you're fighting a crocodile, for example, you don't just go up and go. You freaking unless you're Crocodile Dundee, I guess. But you gain its trust by giving it food, then you whack it on the top of the head, and that's how you deal with it. And it's the same thing for Israel, as they were pretty much the head of the snake. The ones controlling Israel were really the ones at the head of the snake, at least on a physical in a physical sense. But so that's just another column basically saying, yeah, Israel is being saved for last because they're the most dangerous out of all of them. Not just because obviously not militarily, because they don't have a strong military. They use us, but just because of a spiritual sense and a brainwashing sense. But anyway, I just wanted to show that. Let's talk about the South African thing. Oh boy! By the way, before I read this, I just want to say, for anyone that watches that clip of him with the South African president, whatever his name is, I forget. Oh no, Cyril Ramaphosa. I probably mispronounced it terribly. But for anyone who thinks, who's just looking at that from and just judging it for what it is, they should really keep in mind that anytime that you have that the cameras are rolling, they always decide what's going to be said before ahead of time, what's off topic and what they're going to be talking about, what's going to be mentioned, etc. They don't just let random stuff like this fly off the handle. If you've ever been in the media, in fact, you don't even have to have been in the media to know that. Even if you're just making a video, for example, like you guys, what you guys are going to be talking about. You're not going to just randomly just like say talk about baseball or something like that, or have a big argument over nothing. So that's another tell sign that this all is scripted. But anyway, so let's go ahead and read this right here. New York Times. Trump lectures South African president in televised Oval Office confrontation. President Trump showed a video and leafed through printouts of what he said was evidence of racial persecution of white South Africans. The evil bastard Franklin Delano Roosevelt became known for his fireside chats, propaganda radio addresses which pacified normiedom during the Great Depression, and later on, his World War. Commander Trump has started his own communication tradition now. Let's call them fireside spats. These entertaining Oval Office humiliation rituals had previously roasted, quote-unquote, Zelensky, if it's even him, of the Ukraine, and to a lesser extent, Netanyahu of Israel. The most recent victim, and what was by far the most brutal roasting, was President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, or possibly someone playing him. The article describes the public ambush which played out before a packed Oval Office and has since been greatly amplified by white hat-controlled, quote-unquote, mainstream media. Quote, Mr. Trump was ready with his response. Turn the lights down and just put this on, he told his aides. A booming video mashup began to play, including footage of people calling for violence against white South farmers in Africa. One clip showed white crosses planted alongside a rural road stretching far into the distance, which Mr. Trump said were part of a burial site for murdered white farmers. The crosses were actually planted by activists staging a protest against farm murders. By the end, with the stunned South African president looking on, Mr. Trump began flipping through a stack of papers, apparently showing white victims of violence in South Africa. Deaf, 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 he said. At least one of the scenes on the screen appeared to be the rallying cry of kill the Boer. Boer means farmer in Dutch and Afrikaans. Wow, winning for white people, about time. And this is just a comparison comparing Trump's recent roast chats against the so-called world leaders, comparing to the brainwashing mechanisms of FDR, what he used to do back in the day. Anyway, this latest fireside spat offers us a good teachable moment for a bullet point crash course on the true tragic history of the once white-governed nation of South Africa. And this is about to be a little history lesson. The descendants of Dutch, mainly, and also some German and I can't pronounce that, French Protestants, settlers began arriving at the Cape of Africa in the mid-1600s. These settlers were primarily farmers, or Boers. The colony grew and prospered. In 1806, the British, the eternal troublemakers, seized control of the Cape Colony, leading to resentment among the Boers. Due to British bullying, many Boers began to move northward into Virgin territory. This mass migration is known as the Great Trek, 1830s to 1840s. The Orange Free State and the South African Republic, Transvaal, were established as a result. The Boers created such a prosperous nation that black Africans began to migrate there for better opportunities. The British, in league with the Rothschild cabal, and the Boer republics clashed over territory, mining rights, and political control. The First Boer War, 1880 to 1881, resulted in a Boer victory, but the Second Boer War, 1899 to 1902, was won by the British. The Union of South Africa was then established in 1910, unifying the Boer republics with other British colonies under British sovereignty. In 1961, South Africa quit the weakened British/Rothschild Empire and again became a sovereign republic. The Republic of South Africa, independent, conservative, religious, and nationalist. This nation quickly became the target of the Rothschild cabal and its Marxist minions. The phony pretext for the coming onslaught against South Africa was its system of racial segregation, which preserved and protected the white minority, the descendants of those who built the nation, from the black majority, who benefited greatly from all that the Boers created and maintained. After decades of outside pressure, quote-unquote sanctions, coming from the quote-unquote international community, and inside pressure incited by Jewish and black communities, South Africa fell into the hands of Nelson Mandela's terrorist anti-white African National Congress in 1994. Today, though elite whites, mainly of English and Jewish descent, generally live well and safely within gated communities. But the middle to lower class whites and farmers have suffered immensely under the ANC as the world turned a blind eye. Thanks to the Q/Trump operation, the world is now watching. Real history delivered in a nutshell. Spread it like butter. During the Second Boer War, the British interned Boers, including women and children, in exposed and poorly supplied concentration camps, which, by the way, the British were the first ones to use concentration camps. So it wasn't the Germans, for anyone, who thinks that. But regardless, the evil Marxist Mandela posed in front of the hammer and sickle with Jewish Marxist Joe Slovo, the Lithuanian-born head of the South African Communist Party. Globalist U.S. President George Herbert Walker Bush welcomes the ANC terrorist who would become South Africa's new president to the White House. And there is not only a bit of history lesson for anyone who doesn't know about any of this, but this is also what the resulting operation is accomplishing. Because all this time, it's always been called a conspiracy theory, right? That white people were being persecuted in Africa was just a conspiracy theory. But now it's being brought out into the open, and now even normies are talking about it. Now, obviously, your far left libtards are going to be like, oh no, it's a conspiracy theory. It's been debunked. Blah 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 blah.
No, even Jason, God bless him, on Raconteurs News, he had South Africans on talking about that.
Yep, I remember there was an old lady that I can remember that talked about it. I forget her name.
I can't remember. He had a couple on, but I've known this has been going on for a long time. And the issue that you've got with that is that they were taking over all this farmland, and they didn't know how to farm. So all of a sudden, there's going to be food shortages, but that's okay because international relations now will help them out. Well, this is how Bill Gates ended up getting a foothold in Africa and things like that. This is why we've got to start taking all this seriously, because Trump isn't just shouting at the president of South Africa for no reason. It's you're saying that Trump is doing all this subterfuge, keep his enemies closer, his friends closer, his enemies closer, and he's doing all this stuff. But we've got to try and see through it as to what are they trying to bring in. I can't speak for Alex, but I'm certainly not on the same boat as you, Taylor, in the fact that Trump is a savior. He certainly presents himself as one. And he's doing good things in comparison to what's gone on before. But this, for me, is because of that strong delusion that you were talking about, Taylor, where everybody's brainwashed. it's the Pied Piper. They're just listening to the music and they're just dancing along to it, and it's a dangerous path. I don't suppose you've heard much of that, Alex, have you, with your technical issues?
I've had to come back on my phone because for some reason all my internet seized up on my laptop. It's just like that constant circle going round and round and round on all my tabs. Even though it's so-called got access to the Wi-Fi, so I had to come on my phone. I tried a few times. I've had to come back on my phone, so I didn't really hear anything.
Well, we were just talking about the South African farmers there. I know Jason had a couple of people on years ago on Raconteurs speaking of this stuff, because, you know, it was, you know, kill Whitey, just like what they were saying on that clip there.
Yeah.
You know, if it was the opposite way around, it would be all over the news internationally. But for some reason it isn't. But it gives the internationalists, the globalists, a foothold in Africa, because if they can't produce their own food, they've got to rely on somebody, and will invest. I think, was it Uganda that the Chinese invested in, gave them a currency and everything? It's about making nice relations, but it's about taking over places. You can't get away from that. But it's interesting, the stuff that you're bringing up, Taylor.
I also want to mention that Rich is absolutely right. He mentioned that the same thing happened in Zimbabwe. I think that was more like 40 years ago or something like that. It could be like 20, but you know, it used to be called Rhodesia, and then after the coup, forget the president's name. Yeah, that was Jimmy Carter's deal. Him and Zbigniew Brzezinski, they overthrew the Rhodesian government, installed their own little puppet. And
well, there you go, Brzezinski, the grand chessboard. He wrote the book. There's nothing changed. Nothing changed. We're all still playing that same bloody role. Just before we shut down, what about this, Taylor? What's your opinion on this? The shocking massacre. Israeli diplomats gunned down. Last night, a horrific tragedy struck right in the heart of Washington, D.C. Two Israeli embassy staffers, Yaron Lachinsky and Sarah Milgrim, a young couple about to be engaged, was gunned down at close range outside the Capitol Jewish Museum. Now, is this just propaganda, or what is the basis behind this, are you thinking?
Just off of a first impression kind of thing, because as I've said before, I don't like to give my final thoughts on something until I give it the 72-hour rule, or I give it 72 hours to develop the story, get more details and such, and then make a final thoughts on it. But as a first initial thought on that really does look like a propaganda story. Because think about it, it's happening in Washington, D.C., it's happening outside of the Jewish Museum, and it's Israelis being shot. When you have that going into the whole narrative about the college campuses, you know, Trump, you know, the whole story about Trump cracking down on the quote unquote anti-Semitism, which itself, again, as I've mentioned before, is another cover, because, you know, that's a whole different story to get into. We don't have time for that right now, but this smells like this smells like a propaganda story, basically, in order to hype up more of the left, because the narrative right now is that the left are the quote unquote anti-Semitics, and that the people on the right are the pro-Israelis, etc. Which the whole point of that is basically to isolate the far left. And that's also what people like AOC and all these other crazy nutters are seemingly crazy nutters are for. You know, you isolate the far left because that's always what the cabal has always been. And showing them off as crazy and as nutty as possible in order to teach people the lesson that they need to learn, that these people are not to be trusted and that they should not have any real power, and that's also what goes into the mainstream media. because you have CNN and MSNBC constantly showcasing stupid stories that are so easily debunked nowadays. They don't even because the way it used to work before the Q operation took control of the mainstream media was that they would always present themselves with some semblance of truth, like maybe a half truth or something like that. Nowadays, though, they're so over the top and so nonsensical, and their ratings show it. Their CNN, MSNBC are down into the tens, in terms of ratings percentage wise. Meanwhile, Fox News is going way up, and Fox News is actually pretty damn good. It's gotten way better in recent years, and it's really interesting to watch. Like, if you just want the basic rundown of the narrative of what you should be following, Fox News is actually not a bad source to look at. Obviously, not if you want the 40,000 foot view of it, but just the basic foundation. But anyway,
there's certainly been well, they're certainly playing the game at the minute. In your summing up then, Taylor, because we've hit 10 o'clock, we've done 2 hours. In your summing up then, after, I know you've watched the whole of that video, especially the Jared Kushner stuff. We can touch on Jared Kushner next week. But the stuff that you learned about Jared Kushner and what Trump is actually doing, where do you see this now playing out? Because obviously you're saying that he's still cloaked against Israel. These rabbis love him, and he's going to let them think that. They think he's going to help them build this third temple. They've got the red heifers there ready for sacrifice. The problem is there's a mosque on top of where they want to build this temple. So do you see anything happening in the short term? And be concise, because we've not got all night.
Rephrase the question. What exactly do you want me to? What exactly are you asking me to say?
Where does Trump go now?
Oh, okay. So I'll try to keep it brief, and that's the main agenda at the moment.
Try really hard.
What?
Try really hard.
I'm trying to think of the right words to say, and it just seems to be that. Well, I'll just put it like this. Even though the agenda is being rolled out a lot slower than we'd like, as long as there's progress from week to week, and it's clear that there is, that's what's important. As long as we don't stagnate and there's always progress, that's then we know that things are that we know it's working. Simple as that.
Okay. So do you not? There's no predictions then. It's going as planned.
I don't like making predictions like that because it's that's just asking to be laughed at when it doesn't happen. So we'll just have to see what happens because I don't have the script.
Okay then, mate. Like I said, now you've got that little bit. Try and put some clips together around that. What will either explain it or what? Because Kushner is certainly doing something in the background. He's being asked to do these peace talks, and he's now boasting about that. So he's got to have some kind of flesh in the game, if you know what I mean.
If you'd like, I'll just say one quick thing about Kushner, just to address it, and that's that Kushner is nothing more than just an agent who's there to basically help move things along over there in the Middle East, and that ties back to Saudi Arabia, and that's a whole different story over there. So, Kushner, he's just an agent. He's basically like a foreign minister without the official capacity, if that makes sense. So, don't put too much attention onto what he himself is doing, but rather on what the results of what we're getting out of it are.
Well, I think that's a bit of an oxymoron to understand what's coming out of it and not understand what he's doing. I think we need to shine a spotlight on what's going on there. I think there's something that everybody's missing that's going on there, because Trump's almost like the opposite of John the Baptist shouting out in the wilderness. the Jews, didn't they say, Alex, on that clip, that the Jews were saying that he's preparing? He's not the Messiah. He's preparing.
No, he's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy.
Yes, he's a very naughty boy. Right, well, I'll send you the link for next week, Taylor. Thanks for your input, mate, and thanks for doing the research that you do and giving us the contrast. It gives us certainly debate marks in the chat room and to talk about. So keep doing what you're doing, pal.
If you don't mind me saying, after you end the show, can we talk for a few minutes? I'd like to talk about something in private.
Okay, I'll give you a couple of minutes, mate. Me and Alex have got a couple of things to talk about, so I'll give you a couple of minutes. All right, pal. Thanks a lot, Taylor. I'll see you later, but I'll see you next week.
All right, sounds good.
God bless, mate.
God bless, man, and God bless everyone else in the chat.
Yeah.
So, Alex, what's your summing up, pal?
God's not dead.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I love that. I love that. I think the Bible and the scriptures are playing a lot more part in these times than what people actually realise because of that delusion that's been going on. But again, it comes back to that: how can people not see it? I think it's going to slap a lot of people in the face, like it did us, I suppose.
I reckon you're right there, pal. It's been an interesting conversation, I think, and we'll look forward to next week and see what other turbulent events happen in the coming 7 days.
It's certainly, I mean, it's not the best setup for me to try and bring these clips and stuff in like I have, because the laptop's 20 years old and I'm hotspotting from my phone. It's not brilliant, but it's not bad. Let's thank everybody. Go on, mate. Say again.
No, it's good. It's good. Sometimes you get these tech gremlins. The main thing is it's conversational, and the chat can at least input something, and we can try and pick up on some of the comments in the chat. It's not always a precise science, but it's just a conversation. It's been happening for a few months now, Paul.
Yeah, it has. It has. We've just got to keep going. I'll start again tomorrow, Bank Holiday Monday, and see what goes on tomorrow. We've got all these earthquakes. We keep getting told that California's going to drop off into the ocean and all this stuff's going to happen. And then you get up in the morning and it's a bit drizzly, birds are singing. So you don't really know what to make of it. We've got to try and discern it. We're getting programmed with a lot of stuff, and it's I suppose it's easy to buy into things. I'm not made of that cloth, mate. I've got to be skeptical, and especially now, things have changed.
That's why I was just going to say, that's why we need to remember Ivan the Peacemaker, because, and it's not insignificant, because Ivan obviously was the terrible, and this associations with water. So to have the inversion of that, you think about Vikings, and what they did, and they were seemingly the opposite of peacemakers, even though they wanted to be farmers in many respects. So we've got to remember the young ones coming through, and that we have more influence, and you'll have influence as a granddad now to shape his young life. And this is always something that we've got more control in a positive sense over than we do over world events. So we've always got to keep the candle flame burning bright in those areas, obviously, and we know you will, pal.
Yeah, I've definitely got a dog in the fight now, mate. So I'd like to thank everybody in the chat room. Great conversation again. Enjoyed it tonight. Thanks for all your input. Thanks for the messages that I've had. I've not been able to answer them all through the week for the congratulations. Mum and baby are both doing great, and even though the father's doesn't seem to get much of a mention, he's really stepped up. He's doing everything. Really. I'm so blessed to see a family coming together like that in a dark world. But we'll shine light on that world. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you all next week. God willing. Night, God bless.
Right.